Hey Taiwan, my name is Black Kofi. Hey me and Kofi. In the last chapter, I covered the key factors behind 222 years of peace. But there is so much that I don't want you to miss. So here I am doing the second part of the episode. 我还是会使用中英文混合的方式，这样我舌头才不会打结。And calling 911。单字母已经是中英文都有了，所以没什么好担心的，对吧？ So, let's quickly review the highlights. In episode 7, I laid out the following. First of all, the ancient name of Taiwan wasn't Taiwan, and it wasn't the Kingdom of Midog either. Those names came from the Chinese and the Dutch. The true name was the Kingdom of Gaia, also known as Truwan, the motherland of the Austronesian race. Formosa was only a geographic label. I then explained how Truwan, or Taclowan, represented the highest form of democracy. No king, no slavery, and equality among all tribes and peoples. I also talked about Gaia, their silent code, the law of human conduct and social harmony. A small elite warrior group from the Tuk Daya tribe, called the Sedik Balay, served as the protectors of Gaia. Next, I discussed how the three major tribes collaborated and interwove their cultures to maintain 222 years of peace and harmony. I emphasize how many members of these tribes eventually assimilated into Han Chinese identity, but not by force. Now you might ask, if the Qing dynasty claimed Taiwan, or what they called Taiwan, as part of their empire, how do we explain this 222-year period of peace? Well, coming from the Formosa Truwan perspective, let me say this loud and clear. N-O, that spells no. I hope by now you realize Chinese history about Formosa is nothing but a carefully crafted disinformation campaign designed to mislead and justify imperial ambition. So how did the reality turn out to be so different from what Chinese records claim? How did this era of peace, free from outside invasions, even begin? If Formosa was truly under Qing rule, then how did Gaia survive? If Formosa was part of the Qing, then how did it maintain independent trade with the Dutch, the late Ming via Japanese channels, Fujian smugglers, the Portuguese via Macau, Malay and Javanese traders from Batavia and Borneo, and even the Spanish Philippines, who maintained regular business with Fujian smugglers, which I believe were none other than the Petrucas and Siraya intermediaries. Now, before we dive deeper, I've got one question for you. What are you going to do with those fake Chinese history books? Fold paper planes? Recycle them? I know you can't wipe your nose with them. They're too stiff. But whatever you do, do not donate them back to libraries. Don't spread that historical fraud. Don't mislead more people about Formosa's real story. Alright then, let's dig into it. First of all, let's anchor down one crucial reason how the 222 years of peace began. Koxinga 这个名字在历史上常被说的乱七八糟，有人叫他民族英雄，也有人说他是海盗王。但从原民的角度来看，他其实是完全不同的一号人物。尽管背后挂着一对话里的中国头衔，他始终被当成一个外来者。可我们心里其实很清楚，他就是一个在敌人。那为什么协同上从来不把他当自己人？ If we have enough time on this episode, I will unbox this mystery. Hopefully by the middle or the ending of this video. 来，我们把这个紧急彻底打开。这段历史真的该被揭露出来，让真相回归它原本的位置。新一代也该终结这场混乱，从真正的历史中去认识、去学习、去醒来。东宁王国不是什么单纯的政治工程。Please You local scholars and bookworms out there， 别再用该 recycle 的加利式教科书来谈台湾。从真实的角度来看，东宁之初就像是一面镜子，它找出来的本来是 Formosa 的展示文化下的复制品，而 Koxinga 也非三头六臂。比起正统的他达亚战士，无论到发体能级展示精神， Koxinga 也只能摸到革边而已。Truwan 绝不会帮 Koxinga 背书 ，but that bloodstream did benefit Koxinga a great deal in terms of recruiting many regular warriors outside of Tatdaya region. I would say majority of them were Papora, Babuza, Paze, and Hawanya, mostly from the patriarchal tribes and mostly running the bloodstream line from Truwan. So this new army 不是为了忠言明着，而是北朝去帮忙彻底改造那个明朝蓝威的体制。明朝那套什么忠君包国、阶级封建早就走不通了。Ming saw how Formosan warriors defeated the Dutch, so they wanted this bravery to continue this time to fight their internal war. This whole thing was 大明在王者前那若转生动您之举 dragging the Formosan 去了吞这个 Chinese 浑水。It was totally uncool as far as I am concerned.
That is whack.
But like I said before, 吐谷阡猿人的个性真的很好相处，也能打仗。明朝汉人就利用吐谷之机，骗他们上战场去打一个不属于自己的战争。Under such notion, do you think Truwan will recognize Koxinga or Tung Ning to be part of the Motherland? There is more to it though. You will be more clear once you saw the entire video without skipping it. So next time when you talk about this very key period of history, you'll be historically correct. If you still haven't recycled your fake history textbooks, what time is your garbage truck coming to your alley? Ha 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 ha. 国新叶的通宁王国其实是一座桥梁，它引用盖亚的精神，那种沉默的平衡与正义之法，从台湾山林 The real Aboriginal name called the Ramtau Plain 南头平原德国形象，一路输出到整个汉人世界的 Ming Dynasty Southern Territory。他挂的是明朝的明，但那只是一匹特制的特洛伊木马，用一面熟悉的旗帜把那些分裂的汉人忠臣暂时团结起来而已。真实目的早就不是在守那个明朝的亡灵，而是接客上时，接明之名，兴嘎雅之岛。But beneath that banner, something deeper was unfolding. A cultural fusion where Tigdaya bloodlines and Han military minds merged into a hybrid warrior race. A people who remember Gaia, yet learn to fight with the tools of empire. This was not colonization from the old China. This was a reclaiming and expansion of Formosa's indigenous sovereignty under the guise of Ming restoration. 当时整成功转变成汉人身份，并不是去扶头像，而是一种扩展自我的选择。毕竟福尔摩沙当时还是一个相对原始的地方，而明找出了在军事上劣势快要被清朝取代之外，其他各方面都显得现今许多。目标从来不是要变成中国人，而是要生存，想出头，要拿回主动权，要在别人的体制里逆转自己出生上的劣势。他们也不是把汉人当地人，而是看懂了局势，懂得如何善用汉人的符号、语言和故事去重塑自己的命运。这也非模仿，而是借力使力，把他者的工具变成自己的资源。I cannot judge if this was the right move. On one hand, it proved that a regular standard of Formosa warrior can fight all the way to China. That was remarkable. But that move had sold out the real root of Formosa. It contaminated the soil of Formosa and disturbed the hell out of simple tribal living and severely damaged the Aboriginal culture. And if that wasn't enough, stick around to the end. You know what more of evilness they learned from the Ming Chinese and end up hurting our own people. And speaking of war, and let's talk about gunpowder. Formosa wasn't just a peaceful island tucked away in the Pacific. It was actually the heart of a global arms trade. Hard to imagine, right? Such a peaceful place, full of friendly people. But beneath the surface lay one of the world's most potent minerals, the key ingredient for making the deadliest gunpowder. Yes, you heard me. 多数台湾人就站在所说的生地上面，与火山土壤中开采的小石炼出一种无敌的火药。The multiple indirect sources and circumstantial accounts do confirm that Formosan saltpeter, xiaoshi, and gunpowder compounds were considered exceptionally potent, more stable in humid conditions. The trajectory and accuracy are tremendously more superior than the Chinese local minerals or other parts of the world. Not only the muzzle velocity that is far stronger, the parabolic path is far more consistent and sustainable, with the most limited arc and shortest downrange. That gives the aiming of the target more accuracy and, most important, of deadly destruction. 荷兰船为了它而来，葡萄牙走私犯为了它冒险，明朝遗臣为了它浴血奋战，而清朝的间谍对它闻之色变。When I dug deeper into it, I found that the Dutch had used Formosa's gunpowder during their initial settlement in New Netherland, what is now called the United States of America.
God bless America.
The British too obtained Formosa gunpowder through Chinese smugglers, which I believe was closely tied to the Koxinga Midag group, disguising themselves as Han Chinese. When British Colonel Richard Nichols arrived in New Amsterdam, now New York, in August 1664, the takeover was remarkably bloodless. This was largely because Dutch Governor Peter Stuyvesant knew that their supply of Formosan gunpowder had long been depleted.
Don't harm the
Meanwhile, the
civilians.
British had arrived with a fresh and powerful stock, Formosa gunpowder, superior in warfare, which they had acquired from smugglers.
Too easy.
The Dutch had been there since 1624, but after losing Formosa to Koxinga in 1662, they were no longer able to replenish their supply. The British seized the opportunity and conquered New York with the very gunpowder once tied to the island the Dutch had lost.
Take him out.
But, in contrary, after Dutch left Formosa, Koxinga 和动者王国耗尽了来自福尔摩沙的珍贵资源，
Remember, boys, it's always
投进了一
darkest
场
before
几乎
dawn.
看不见未来的战争。表面看是徒劳，但其实是一场无止境的梦。这场梦想
We
着
won the battle.
有一
Now
天
let's go win the war.
福尔摩沙之子将承接那种有君臣式的天明，但不是为了再造一个新的中国王朝，而是要诞生出全然不同的东西，一个后命文明。它不是延续低质，而是建立在盖亚的骨架上，靠着 Formosa 的坚韧精神锻造而成。有一套比人和中国生之都还神圣古老的准则所统一，那是平衡、荣誉、弘扬族灵律法的信仰。Koxinga's big ambition, right? 其实把程度重了些。On the way to the self-destruction. Since the war drags on, but what is that really? I don't see how Tung Ning actually succeeded. Honestly, it just feels like another chapter in the chronic cycle of Chinese dynasties. The same old vicious loop. Nothing new. Nothing that feels personally significant to me. I can't speak for everyone, but come on, what else is ever really new in mainland China? Back to the 222 peaceful years. That didn't just happen. They were forged, planned, and protected, and carefully executed with a secret transition that almost no one else would know. 你应该知道，突库或铁达亚的战士精神是不到最后绝不停止的。那么问题来了，如果清朝根本没答应，那他们为什么会停战？如果清朝答应，那福尔摩沙那2222年的和平又不符合清朝的历史本命。为了让这个转折点讲得够清楚， 我们必须深入了解一件事，在 Truwan 社会系统里有个关键机制，大家可能都忽略了。来，我们继续挖下去。Let's dig into the real feminine power in Formosa, then you'll understand why there was that 222 years of peace without intruders. The Truwan lineage, often associated with the broader groups, is a critical piece in understanding how pre-colonial Formosan society was structured, not as a primitive or fragmented set of tribes, but as a complex civilizational network rooted in Gaia, and uniquely balanced between matrilineal and patriarchal values. Under the Gaia Protocol, even when a violation happens, no clan may cross territorial lines with weapons unless invited by the clan elders of the afflicted group. Otherwise, it could spark intertribal war or violate the sovereignty of the matrilineal domain. The fake Gaia killers from the Tung Ning kingdom seriously violated the Gaia, and their action was beyond redemption. It was a planned killing that attempted to break the bonds and create misunderstanding between Siraya and Truku. All of that was to ruin the relationships so the gunpowder trades through the Sirayan can be terminated by Truwan. And no doubt, the Ming Chinese military strategists initiated this killing of the Sirayan while Tung Ning had full access of the Siraya plains during the massacre. However, the strong feminine ties was the reason that Tung Ning could not break the close bonds between the two tribes. So, let's understand the social system a bit before we conclude how women power could end this war and impacted Chinese history to flip the new chapter and brought 222 years of peace to Formosa's own sovereignty, shall we? Turku 包括他们的塔鲁湾血统的 Toda、Takdaya、and Patruku 为双结构社会，并不像某些古老母系制度那样将单一性别的角色被彻底边缘化。尤其是今天，随着极端女权浪潮崛起，有些女性甚至走向一种无限自怜与滥用与权力斗争。老实说 ，for any society or race， 这不是一个健康的现象。当许多家庭开始制度性的排斥性别，是会导致整个社会结构的失衡与崩坏。In the vivid example of Formosa， 想象过去荷兰人屠杀的历史，日本对圣战士的压迫与侵袭 ，Scapegoating 被日军瓦解，与 Gaia 信仰最终的出走的命运。破口军援与 Taboo 及 Siraya 的领域 ，but 这些悲剧对整体 Formosa 而言，从来不只是生活层面的苦难，而是当某种力量失去平衡，走向极端后所引爆的连锁灾难，或一夕之间全归零。Nothing but tragic。我并不是在否定某类制度的价值，但我要强调。任何观念或信仰一旦走向极端，最终都会反噬整个族群，甚至国家的命运。在我看来，男女之间真正的价值是在平衡与互不中才能体现，而非我行我素。不管你是站在女权或父权哪方，部分男女，不管你多聪明、多会说外语、多会计量、多有前瞻思维，如果你失去了人性，断了根，只剩下冷冷无情的计算，就算你有再大的资源和本领，那你获得就跟一个没灵魂的 AI 程式没两样。Am I right or am I right？ 但清醒的是，在福尔摩沙的历史里 ，regardless how uncharitable any tribes got carried out。最后能活下来、能走得远的，永远是那些懂得妥协与平衡的族群。The cold, tactical mind with an iron will often leads to a tragic outcome. You might gain a whole lot, only to end up losing everything that was never truly yours to begin with. Truwan 的社会制度是一种平衡模型，男女各司其职，彼此尊重，在族群为难时。Truwan 系的 Patruku 也曾经无条件地扶持其他部落中心站起来，不求回报。东主人报信后 ，Siraya 部落的再生就奠基在这样的精神之上。 楚湾非侵略师的帮助他们的以保留及传承自己的信仰与母系文化特色。At the beginning of when tragic happened, protect them, gave them as much aid as one can, simultaneously telling the Tung Ning that Sirayan moved to Truwan Motherland, a place that well protected by the warrior of Gaia, the true Sadiq Balay. That way no one was able to come near. Meantime, Patruku helped the Sirayan to settle in other parts of Formosa, where the Patrukus are familiar with. So the Sirayan 可同时走向更成熟的族群治理，并加强和其他族群共存，接受海域大地河山的连结，扩大人与非单一大自然的信仰，让族人一起扎根于这块土地上，保护自己，避免一再的过度信赖外来的势力，善待这块土地上其他各族群的人，不管他们多土多本，也要是同为自己人。Truku is not just a typical patriarchal system, mainly because the female role is equally important as the male role, which vests into a clear definition within the society and most families. 所以 Truku 其实也不是那种传统斯班的父权社会，因为女性在整个家族跟社会里的角色一样重要，而那一般的重要性已经包容了母系社会中的基本女权。这也是为什么当我们在讲 Siraya 的单一女权逻辑时，在 Truwan Truku 的社会秩序内能自然的接纳和共存，因为是民主根本社会中两套完全不同的系统都存在 Truwan 的社会里，也包含各族不同结构的单方或良性平权。So then female leaders in the Truwan request the entire network to help the Siraya. Everyone came to help. That is a remarkable social strength, a strong social system under the form of democracy. Truwan 他们讲究的是男女分工清楚，但地位是平等的。男生有男生要负责的事，女生也有他们主导的领域。这不是谁压锅水，而是一套分工明确的社会架构。Male and female don't cross each other as the main principle of rule. I can even see if the female can do the male role perfectly in some cases. That would even be allowed as individual cases without the need of bragging. That is how Truwan Truku to separate the distinction by using an extension to two major branches. One is Toda. Sex equality consists of mixture in male-female sentiment and vice versa. And one being Tikdaya. A clear definition of male warrior's role to protect territories with even more clear female role in charge with major domestic ritual and some aspects of diplomatic affairs. So for this topic alone, I need to create a complete separate episode. But let's not go off the focus of how femme power in Formosa stopped this war and initiated the 222 years of peace. This might sound shocking to you. With the Gaia spirit embedded in the Tung Ning warriors, many believed they would fight to the very end, never surrendering, never compromising. But we've overlooked a crucial truth. It wasn't the sword that ended the war. It was the wisdom of women, working silently behind the scenes, guided by compassion and clarity. So what really happened? The Sirayan leaders, who came from a matrilineal tradition, were predominantly women. They held leadership not only in title but in spiritual authority within their coastal territories. And although they didn't command the fierce Truku warriors, nor did they seek to, they understood something deeper. How to influence through relationships, not confrontation. These Sirayan women maintained strong and direct ties with the female balance keepers of the motherland Truwan. These were the women within Truku society who, though not publicly titled, made most of the critical decisions inside the household. In silence, with deliberation, and with Gaia as their guide. The Sirayan women, some of whom were mixed in ancestry or culturally integrated with Truku and other plains tribes, saw the war for what it was becoming, a blood-draining stalemate. It was costing the Tung Ning kingdom enormous manpower and exhausting tribal networks. More than that, it was beginning to fracture the spiritual integrity of the motherland. So they made a quiet revolutionary proposal. The Sirayan foresaw the immense value of Formosa's natural resources and their potential global impact. After the Tung Ning fabricated Siddiq Bail incident, the Sirayan approached the female elders of Truwan, urging that Tung Ning abandon its campaign to reconquer China, a war that was never truly theirs to begin with. Instead, they urged a new path, a prosperity through global trade, exporting Formosa's unmatched gunpowder minerals, natural resources, and rare goods to Japan, the Dutch, the Portuguese, the Malay world, and beyond. To their surprise, the Truwan women agreed. Since most mining work were protected by the Pazetruku, the Patrukas, and the extended tribes among them, it will only benefit a great deal to Truwan not to waste any more resources to just win that unrealistic Chinese label. Instead, a global exporting business could bring the Formosa to a higher state of prosperity. They too had watched their relatives and extended tribes drained into a war that no longer served the ancestral purpose. It was peace, they realized, could protect Gaia far better than conquest ever could. It was also the prosperity, when shared across the tribes, could restore balance to the land. But neither the Sirayan women nor the Truwan female elders could publicly confront the strong Tung Ning army. The devotion of the Tung Ning army, rooted in honor, Ming, and spirit of the Formosa warrior, would never accept surrender outright.
It ain't over till it's over.
The fam group also didn't want to persuade the Trukutik Daya warriors to intervene because they were afraid that it might complicate the situation or lead to an unnecessary conflict in the masculine world. So instead, they orchestrated peace behind the scenes. Using their networks of family ties, marriage alliances, and ritual influence, they engineered an ending to the war that actually a withdrawal, not a defeat in reality. A peace plan that executed by Sirayan and Truku Toda women, which solicited through the help of Japanese traders that had close ties with the Qing army. The proposal was that they let the Qing claim a hollow victory, while protecting Formosa's sovereignty through a quiet, sacred pact. The Qing would write their history fiction any way they want and keep their glowing face. But Truwan kept his truth and retained his inventory. This was the true end of the Ming Loyalist War. Not through battlefield loss, but through female strategy, tribal unity, and a spiritual commitment to survival. They didn't need to win the war. They needed to preserve the land, the people, and the continued Gaia. And that's exactly what they did. So now, did the garbage truck arrive your alley yet? Have you not recycled the fake history textbooks yet? 回收车还不来哦，大马卡进来了，哈哈哈哈哈哈 Never too late.这22年和平的关键转捩点，就是当 Truwan 墓地加上 Siraya 个部落，终于看清一个残酷的事实：郑喜和他的战士们，如果还要继续打下去，继续应承中国后明招着权，最后只会牺牲更多，一切太不值得了。啊，你也喂！与其继续现在没完没了的战争中耗光自己，真正聪明的做法是转向国际贸易。特别师傅二抹杀那些被抢主要的矿产资源，用来制造全世界最顶级的火药，是正确的时机从战场走向商场了。本来就跟日本商人有长期往来的斯拉雅人，这时候路线出着，他们主动找上日本，跑出一个超前有大胆的提案。让日本军或上担任中立的信托调解人，居中协调动宁王国和新兴的清帝国，结束这场流血冲突。这样一来，也等于正式替明朝画下句点，迎接一个全新的清朝时代。The negotiated agreement was as brilliant as it was unspoken. 福尔摩沙这边会放弃所有历史上的胜败说法，动着政权从此走入中掌。Formosa didn't have a written language to begin with.Aside from the early alphabet system introduced to the Siraya, but they kept it to themselves and never shared it with other tribes. Only the Tung Ning regime could read or write basic Han characters. So, that kind of worked out, right? A nation that was almost entirely illiterate, up against a regime built on recorded history and written legacy. 清朝那边呢，想怎么写历史就怎么写。要说他们统一了沿海，鹰的光荣，甚至中协整个战局都随他们。But the most important of all， 作为交换条件是什么 ？That is， 一兵一卒的清军永远不得他上福尔摩沙本岛，连周边岛屿都不准碰。But if they ever cross the line, Formosa will return to the battlefield.I will chop off your head. That all tribute to 这片土地照就维持原样，文化不被燃脂，嘎亚的静默律法依然完整存在。这场交易并不是处于恐惧，而是来自女性视角的战略智慧。Truwan选择了和平，但不是屈服；选择了生存，但不是被磨灭。他们让清朝去抢版面，写历史，长胜利。福尔摩沙则静静守住主权，照样搞贸易，照样建立繁荣，照样依照祖先的嘎呀自我治理。这才是真正开启222年和平的起点，不是靠政府，而是靠外交手腕、部落团结，还有一种强大的女性的力量，知道什么时候该转向。你都丢了。Now, even though we talk about the 222 years of peace, don't think for a second that it came easy. And I'm telling you, what I've shared so far, there is a heavier load of bloody truth behind it. What I'm about to tell you is what really triggered the rise of women's power. A unified decision made by the female leaders of Truwan due to the incident happened to the Siraya. But that decision didn't come cheap. It came at the cost of nearly an entire generation of Siraya people.A sacrifice made just to set the stage for the 222 years of peace. 台湾狼590机关，阿拉。Hit pause if you need to go wee wee. Otherwise, get ready. We're flipping the page. We don't study history to hold grudges. We study it to restore what was broken. To remember who we are and to not lose our way again. Before I get into the story of the Gunpowder betrayal and the scapegoating that followed, I need to say this clearly. Among Formosans, something as deeply marked as this has rarely been spoken aloud. Personally, I believe you all deserve to know what really happened.Not to stir division, but so we can grow, reflect, and become better human beings. To learn from the past, understand each other, and find harmony within our own land. As humanity shifted from tribal societies to nation states, these truths became more important than ever, too important to remain taboo. I once spoke with a Sirayan pastor. He carried a heavy sense of grief and even resentment toward Gaia and the Truku people.But I could see clearly he was missing key parts of the story. He had taken one piece of a tragic incident and placed the blame on the wrong people. Now imagine a pastor, someone who carries influence and compassion, being fed misinformation by false narrators, propagandists, or fabricators whose goal is to keep Taiwan's tribes divided. They don't want us to unify.They don't want us to expose the illegitimacy of external invaders stealing our land and resources. They want to break our minds, break our children, all for the sake of preserving their luxurious survival, built on exile, deception, and control. Formosa had the best gunpowder ingredients in central tribal territories, produced high-grade saltpeter, xiaoshu, charcoal and tree resins, and sulfur from volcanic and coastal zones.The smart Siraya leveraged the mines from the Patruku tribes and traded them with the Dutch, Japanese, and Spanish Philippines during the post-Dutch era, while the Tung Ning kingdom was still at war with the Chinese mainland. The Sirayan sold raw materials, not necessarily fully processed gunpowder. The Japanese, known for their expertise in metallurgy and chemistry, refined these ingredients.Some Japanese merchants were covertly supplying them to Qing military networks, particularly during the chaotic transition from Ming to Qing rule. Did the Sirayan know about Japanese and Qing's trade? That remains a taboo subject. What we do know is that the Sirayan followed a markedly different spiritual tradition. Their devotion to the ocean deity and their belief that destiny flowed with the tides shaped a worldview embedded in movement, fluidity, and opportunity. Naturally, their commercial decisions followed the currents of benefit, favoring trade partners who offered the greatest advantage. Is that fair to say? However, such a system does not anchor itself in rootedness. Societies where ancestral roots are considered a supreme virtue, the Siraya's beliefs did not prioritize permanence or land-bound lineage. Their foundation was fundamentally different, instead they flow. Linguistic, cultural, and maritime migration patterns point to their closest ancestral ties being with the Ivatan from the Batanese Islands, the Ilocano and Itbayat of northern Luzon, and the Visayan Babaylan traditions of the central Philippines. This strongly suggests that the Sirayan arrived on the coastal plains of Formosa by sea from nearby island regions. Importantly, the concept of rootedness, central to Truwan and other indigenous systems, was not embedded in Siraya cosmology. Furthermore, by the post-Dutch period, some Sirayan had already converted to Catholicism, making it even harder for them to align with the principles of Gaia, despite being a minority group but stood firm about the ocean god. This era was particularly difficult for that one very spiritual group of Siraya, and less troublesome to the mixed Siraya Truku Toda or Siraya Patruku that complied to Gaia. Tung Ning during that time had secured control over the coastal regions to prevent further foreign intrusion, and the Siraya's lands became increasingly pressured by the influx of the local Han culture promoters and the cultural shifts they brought. These overlapping tensions, spiritual, cultural, and territorial, contributed to a growing divide between the Siraya and other tribes, so they became somewhat isolated. In contrast, the Tung Ning soldiers, while reflecting the outward image of Formosan warrior spirit, had already assimilated into Han Chinese identity and took pride in representing both sides of that cultural spectrum. The Truwan people, however, drew a clear line between the Tung Ning and the Truku, or Tigdaya warriors, largely because the Truku culture remained firmly rooted in its own high virtue of Gaia traditions. They were not opposed to the extended bloodstream lines into the mainland under the name of Tung Ning, but they do recognize Tung Ning under the Truwan system. In fact, they were pleased to see the expansion of Gaia's spirit into the global scale, regardless the new extended group called themselves Han Chinese or not. That was how democratic the motherland of Truwan was to the descending streamlines, as long as they continued to support the silent code of conduct under Gaia. As for which tribes converted and became part of the Tung Ning military forces, it was a general amalgamation of various, often untraceable tribal groups just so Tung Ning could grow rapidly. Many among them lacked a clear understanding of their ancestral lineages and were scattered across the island, making them easy to conscript. And these new Chinese conversion under Tung Ning went from an unclear ancestral lineage to became a new Chinese soldier. They were generally been called the Pingpu tribe, which means the scattered plain tribe of folks. The Tung Ning military force was indeed a mixed group, including a significant number of domestic soldiers from the mainland. But personally, I do not believe most of them ever truly came to Formosa. Therefore, this massacre was likely a premeditated act carried out under the banner of the Ming loyal Tung Ning forces. These operatives, disguised as anti-Qing warriors, had to assume yet another identity, this time to commit mass violence without the legitimate sanction of Gaia. One thing I am 100% sure, one that knows Gaia will not commit in such crime. These killers weren't Gaia descends, they weren't Truku, Patruku, nor anything from the actual Truwan lineage. Unfortunately, that pastor got it all wrong to start with. Thanks for the KMT Chinese that tried to divide the Formosa unity. As long as I am still breathing, I will bust their lies and bring them to your vivid eyes. KMT Adali Mahole.